Hey, welcome back to another PHP 2 tutorial. We're moving closely to the end here. We're hopefully going to finish up the search handler and the final display of our results. So we spent most of the time in the previous tutorials getting this database service running, but rapidly we're coming to the end of this milestone. So the search handler is what's on the score here today. So we've created this business service, and this class will be used by the handler. Now, index is the form, and you can see that in the form there is a item named name. So we're searching for the person's first name. Now, our job is to create this search handler PHP file right now. So let's go to the new PHP command, and let's call it search handler. Now, this is going to get something from our browser. So let's call this search phrase, and it's going to be the get variable, and it's going to take the item called name. So that will capture the results from whatever the input was in this this control right here. Now we're going to have to call the search command from our business service. So let's take a look at what that was. So that was find by first name, and we're using business service. So since we're using the business service, we better require it. And now we should be able to create a new instance of it. So let's call it BS equals a new business service class. We're going to have a list of items here, so let's call it persons is going to be equal to the BS where we get the person's first name. And instead of using the letter N as our search, we are using the item called search phrase. Okay, so that will take the name from our input field, turn it into a variable called search phrase. Search phrase will be sent to our business service, and we will return with a persons array. So I'm going to put some comments in here so that it makes more sense to us. Okay, so the first comment is that we're going to get the search term from the input form, and then we have to create an instance of our business service class. Then we're going to call the by first name search and assign it to a variable called persons. So normally we would just go on and do some echoes and for loops and display things. However, in the idea of modularity, we're just going to include another file here. So let's say if we get some results. So if the persons array exists, then we're going to assume that we got some results. So then we're going to include another file. So I'm going to invent a file name now, and it's going to be called display search results. Now, the display search results is going to be kind of a partial file. So you can see we're inserting it halfway through the page. So a good notation is an underscore that lets you know that's kind of a partial page. If we don't get any results, then we should probably echo something back and say, nobody found here like that. Okay, so now we need to put a little bit of HTML at the top of the page, and then we can go on and do this partial file. So I'm going to put in an H2 and call it search results. Alright, so now you get some errors in here. Why doesn't it like HTML code? Well, we're in the middle of a PHP region, so it won't work that way. So we're going to have to end our PHP and start HTML, and then restart PHP afterwards. So a couple of breaks there, and now we're ready to go. Okay, so next up is to create this file called display search results. So let's make a new file and use that exact file name. So display search results.php. So in this file, I'm expecting to get an array of person, and then I'm going to display the results in the table. So let's just try printing first. So we're going to say a for loop is going on, and so let's create a counter variable. So start at item 0, and that counter has to be less than the number of items in our persons array. So, and then the loop counter is counting by 1. So let's return to this page for a moment. This was the testing only application that we created, and it printed the array. As you can see, the array has items in it from 0 to 3. And then each of those is another array with actual field names in it. So if I wanted to access the word Howard, for instance, I would take the word persons, find item 0, and then a sub-item of first name. So here's what that looks like in code. So I would say, if I wanted to find the first person, I would say persons, and if item 0 is the first guy, and then his second array item is called first name, and that should equal, what's his name, Howard? That's what I'm expecting. So since I can loop through the array, the $x is the item called the first counter there. So let's print that. So that should be the first name, and of course we can print the others as well. So let's copy and paste the others. So we're expecting first and last name. Is there anything else in there? We just have first and last name, I believe. We also have his ID number. Well, just for fun, let's print the ID number, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, well, let's see if this actually runs. The formatting is going to look ugly, but at least we'll have data on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my search. I'm going to use the letter A to search, and it says, here's what we found. It did find all of these users, and it displayed the results, so not bad. Okay, so obviously we need to have some formatting. Well, let's try and do this with a table, okay? So first of all, we have to create the first row in the table. So let's create some HTML here. So this is going to be table, and that's going to go afterwards. So the table header. And inside of here, we're going to have 3 items. We're going to have the so we're going to have a TD and an NTD, and we're going to need 3 of those because we have 3 columns. And inside of here, let's put in the let's reorder these, by the way. Let's go with ID first. So I'm going to move the search results. So ID, first name, and last name. So the first one is going to be simply the ID. Then the next table header is first name, and then the last one is last name. And I'm going to put in some PHP beginning and end markers. Okay, so we're double checking to see if we got headers. So refresh the page. Looks like we have ID, first and last name. Okay, so then the next thing is we have to put in a new row every time we begin. So it might be easier just to echo TR as new row. And then afterwards we echo another TR. And then in between, these guys get a TD. So let's put in a TD to begin and also at the end. So the real way to do this is through templating, and we haven't discovered any of that apparently in our tutorials yet. So we're doing this kind of like tediously inserting a bunch of text here right in the middle of our code. Not maybe the best practice, but for right now it's the early version of your integration with templates and coding. Let's see what that does. Okay, refresh the page, and there we have it. So we have the titles and we have columns. Alright, so now we need to do some major CSS work to make this look better. So it's a little strange. Why did we get / display? That sounds like a comment that got put into an echo statement. Let's go back and see if we can find it. So sure enough, right here in the search handler, I put in the word display, and it was not a comment. It was in the HTML section. There we go, search results. Now why are these so ugly? I guess that's your job to figure out. We've got ourselves alignment issues in our table. So it looks like we got the basic idea working now. Now the goal here that you're eventually going to create is not just a ugly text table like this, but let's take a look at some examples of what might be better. So here is a catalog of some products. Notice they have nice colored column headers. Here's a little bit more the same. We've got some CSS formatting. This to me looks like they're using Bootstrap. So that looks prettier. Everything's nicely aligned with the decimal points. Here's another example. This person is using Bootstrap, obviously, and each item, each product has a photo and a nice button, a couple of description items. So that's kind of getting close to the end of what your project will look like. Here's another example where we have a photo, a small description. All these people are not just inventing these CSS items. They're probably just borrowing templates from Bootstrap and people like that that are creating CSS for us. But for this result, we were interested in the n-layered approach, and we have accomplished it. So back to the beginning, we have a search form which talks to the search handler, which talks to the business service, which talks to the database service, which finally gets down to the database physically itself. And so that is the accomplishment of all the files that you see here on the left side of the screen.